The paradoxical nature of strength within histrionic weakness is explored. How apparent vulnerability can be a surprising source of influence and manipulation for the individual with histrionic tendencies is uncovered. Strength often reveals itself through vulnerability, not the absence of it. People misunderstand what strength really means. They think it's about being unbreakable, about keeping a straight face while the world collapses around you. They imagine that to be strong is to never cry, never doubt, never falter. But that's not strength, that's rigidity. And rigidity breaks. Real strength isn't the absence of weakness, it's the integration of it. It's the ability to confront your own pain without being shattered by it. It's the capacity to feel, to hurt, to be uncertain, and still keep moving forward. You see, when someone hides all vulnerability, what they're really doing is hiding from themselves. They build walls, thick, cold, impenetrable walls, because they believe that if no one sees their weakness, it can't be used against them. But those walls don't just keep others out, they trap you inside. The emotions you suppress don't disappear, they congeal into bitterness, resentment, and shame. Over time, they start to leak through the cracks. And when they do, they emerge as rage, despair, or apathy. That's not strength. That's fear wearing armor. Vulnerability is what allows transformation. It's the moment when you admit that you don't have everything under control, that life has the power to wound you, that you're not invincible. And yet, paradoxically, that admission is what begins to make you strong. Because only when you stop pretending that you're untouchable can you begin to understand what truly sustains you. When you let yourself be vulnerable, you discover that you can endure more than you thought possible. You learn that your heart, though fragile, is resilient beyond measure. It takes immense courage to be open in a world that punishes openness. To say, "I'm struggling," without collapsing into self-pity. To reveal emotion without turning it into performance. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's exposure. And exposure is what allows truth to enter. When you stand bare in front of your own chaos, you can finally see what's actually there. Not what you wish were there, not what you pretend to others, but the raw, unfiltered reality of your being. From that confrontation comes the possibility of strength that isn't dependent on illusion. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who seem truly strong. They aren't the ones who never fall apart, they're the ones who face their pain with honesty and still act with integrity. They can admit when they're wrong. They can ask for help. They can weep without shame. That's not weakness, that's authenticity. And authenticity is the deepest form of strength because it aligns you with reality instead of protecting you from it. When you're vulnerable, you allow life to shape you. You stop resisting every wound and start learning from it. You realize that pain is a teacher, not an enemy. The capacity to feel deeply, to let your heart break, is what gives meaning to endurance. Without vulnerability, strength becomes hollow. It's a brittle mask, a fragile performance. But when vulnerability and strength coexist, something remarkable happens. You gain both sensitivity and resilience. You become soft enough to understand others and firm enough to protect what matters. That's why vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength, it's its foundation. Without it, your strength has no soul. Without it, your courage has no compassion. Without it, your endurance becomes mechanical, disconnected from the very life it's supposed to serve. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up with all your scars visible, not hiding them, not pretending they don't exist, but showing that even in your brokenness, you chose to rise. Emotional expression becomes destructive when it replaces self-reflection. It's one thing to feel deeply, that's necessary, that's human, but it's another thing entirely to let your emotions dictate your identity. There's a danger in confusing expression with understanding. People think that by venting, by dramatizing, by externalizing every emotional impulse, they're healing. But in reality, they might just be reinforcing the same patterns that caused their suffering in the first place. Expression without reflection becomes chaos masquerading as authenticity. It feels like relief in the moment, but it's often just avoidance in disguise. When you express without reflection, your emotions control you. You're not choosing your reactions, they're choosing you. You become caught in a loop of reactivity, where every feeling demands to be broadcasted, validated, and confirmed by the outside world. That can feel empowering for a moment, but it erodes your stability. Because what happens when no one's listening? What happens when your pain isn't seen or acknowledged? You collapse because you've outsourced your self-understanding to the reactions of others. That's not freedom. That's dependency. Reflection, on the other hand, turns emotion into insight. It's the act of pausing and asking, asterisk, why am I feeling this way? Asterisk. It's refusing to be swept away by the current long enough to see where the river is actually flowing. When you start reflecting instead of just expressing, you begin to notice patterns, the same arguments, the same disappointments, the same insecurities resurfacing again and again. Those repetitions aren't coincidences, they're signals. They're your psyche's way of asking you to pay attention. But if you're constantly performing your feelings, you'll never have the stillness required to listen to what they're actually saying. The problem with our culture is that it rewards expression more than introspection. The louder your pain, the more attention you receive. The more dramatic your breakdown, the more sympathy you attract. But that attention doesn't heal you. It just reinforces the need to keep performing. You start to believe that your worth is tied to how loudly you can suffer. And so instead of transforming your emotions, you start recycling them. You become addicted to your own drama because it gives you identity, and that identity feels safer than the quiet uncertainty of reflection. But reflection is where transformation happens. It's uncomfortable, yes, because it demands responsibility. It asks you to see your role in the chaos. It asks you to consider that maybe not everything that hurts you is someone else's fault. It asks you to stop narrating your pain and start analyzing it. That's hard work. It's easier to express, to cry out, to post about it, to talk endlessly than it is to sit in silence and truly times think. Asterisk. Yet it's that silence, that deliberate confrontation with your own mind, that produces growth. Emotional expression is healthy when it's integrated with awareness. But without reflection, it becomes an endless cycle of reaction. It becomes noise instead of understanding, spectacle instead of healing. True strength lies in the balance to feel deeply, yes, but also to examine deeply. To use emotion as information, not as identity. To let your feelings speak, but not to let them speak for you. True growth comes from integrating, not performing, your suffering. It's easy to confuse the display of pain with the process of healing. The world often rewards visible struggle, tears, outrage, confession, the open wound, and so people learn to perform their suffering as a form of validation. But there's a difference between showing pain and transforming it. To integrate suffering is to take it seriously enough to learn from it, to absorb its lessons, to let it reshape you into something wiser and steadier. To perform suffering is to remain stuck in it, repeating the same emotional patterns while believing that expression alone equals progress. When you integrate your suffering, you stop treating it as an enemy. You begin to see that pain isn't something to escape, but something to study. Every wound contains information about your limits, your values, your attachments, your fears. Most people don't look long enough to discover that. They rush to declare themselves victims or survivors, clinging to the identity that pain gives them because it offers clarity, even if it's rooted in misery. Integration asks more of you than that. It asks you to dismantle the story you've built around your suffering and to see what's beneath it. It asks you to face the part of yourself that contributed to it. Performing suffering might gain you sympathy, but it costs you growth. It keeps you dependent on the reactions of others. You start to believe that being seen as broken is safer than becoming whole. But the truth is, growth can only happen in solitude, in the quiet space where there's no one left to applaud your endurance. That's where real change begins, when you stop needing others to witness your pain and start listening to what it's trying to teach you. The moment you do that, you move from victimhood to responsibility, from chaos to order. Integration is an act of discipline. It's not glamorous or dramatic. It's slow, often lonely work. It means revisiting memories you'd rather avoid, confronting habits that keep you small, and accepting truths that dismantle your self-image. It's a process of taking raw emotion and turning it into structure, understanding the meaning of what happened instead of endlessly reliving how it felt. When you integrate your suffering, you give it a place in your story without letting it define the story. It becomes a chapter, not the entire book. The paradox is that by refusing to perform your pain, you actually deepen your humanity. You no longer need to prove that you've suffered. Your presence carries the quiet weight of what you've overcome. Integration doesn't erase emotion, it refines it. It turns anger into conviction, sorrow into empathy, loss into wisdom. The energy that once fueled performance becomes fuel for creation. The same fire that once consumed you begins to illuminate your path. That's what growth looks like, not spectacle, but transformation, not reaction, but realization, not the appearance of healing, but the embodiment of it. Weakness is the raw material from which genuine strength is forged. People often believe that to be strong, you must first eliminate all signs of weakness. They think strength begins where fragility ends, as if the two exist on opposite sides of a line. But that's a misunderstanding of how human beings grow. Every quality of strength, resilience, courage, patience, humility is born out of confrontation with limitation. Without weakness, there would be nothing to overcome, nothing to refine, nothing to transform. Strength isn't the absence of weakness, it's the mastery of it. When you recognize your weakness, you're not admitting defeat, you're identifying the place where growth begins. It's uncomfortable to face the parts of yourself that falter, the places where you fall short, the tendencies that embarrass you. But that discomfort is essential. It's the pressure that pushes you toward development. If you hide from your weaknesses or deny them, they grow in the dark, shaping your behavior without your awareness. But if you expose them to the light of consciousness, they become tools for transformation. You can't build something solid until you've examined the cracks in the foundation. The strongest individuals aren't those who have never been weak. They're those who have learned to engage with weakness directly. They've suffered, failed, doubted themselves, and instead of being crushed by it, they've studied it. They've extracted meaning from their struggle. That's what gives their strength, depth, and authenticity. It's not bravado, not a pose, but an earned capacity to endure. A person who has never wrestled with weakness might appear confident, but it's an untested confidence. The first real challenge will reveal how shallow it is. Real strength emerges only through trials that expose your vulnerability and force you to cultivate endurance. Weakness humanizes you. It keeps arrogance in check and opens the door to compassion. When you've known your own fragility, you become slower to judge others. You understand that everyone carries private battles, unseen burdens, and internal fractures. That understanding doesn't make you softer in the sense of being naive. It makes you stronger in the sense of being grounded. You stop needing to dominate or posture because your strength is no longer about appearances. It's about stability. It's about being capable of holding your own suffering without letting it harden your heart. Every moment of weakness contains a seed of potential. When you fail, you gain a mirror that reveals who you are and what you need to become. When you break down, you discover what truly holds you together. When you're humbled, you learn that dignity isn't pride but persistence. The process of turning weakness into strength isn't glamorous, it's quiet, often painful work. But it's through that process that integrity is formed. The metal of your character is forged in the furnace of your limitations. The heat of struggle burns away illusion until only what is real remains, and what remains is stronger because it has been tested. Redemption lies in transforming chaos into disciplined order. Every person carries a degree of chaos within them, emotions, impulses, fears, desires that pull in different directions. Chaos is the raw state of being human. It's the unformed potential from which everything meaningful can emerge. But without discipline, that potential dissolves into confusion. Chaos by itself has energy, but it lacks structure. It can inspire creativity, but it can also destroy. The difference between the two lies in whether you choose to confront it consciously or allow it to rule you. Redemption, the restoration of purpose and integrity, begins when you take responsibility for that chaos and give it form. Most people are afraid of chaos because it reminds them of their limitations. They'd rather avoid their inner disorder, distract themselves, or impose shallow forms of control that only suppress the turmoil temporarily. But avoidance doesn't bring peace, it breeds stagnation. The mind that refuses to face chaos becomes its prisoner. Discipline, on the other hand, is the act of voluntarily confronting the unknown and shaping it into something coherent. It's the decision to impose order where there is none, to create direction where there was only drift. That's why discipline is not the opposite of freedom, it's the foundation of it. When you live without discipline, chaos leaks into everything. Your habits, your relationships, your ambitions. You become reactive, easily swayed by mood and circumstance. One day you're full of conviction, the next you're paralyzed by doubt. You lose consistency because there's no structure to hold you. Discipline gives you that structure. It transforms fleeting emotion into sustainable action. It takes the scattered energy of chaos and channels it toward a goal. And when you do that long enough, you start to notice that what once felt overwhelming begins to serve you instead of consume you. Transforming chaos into order doesn't mean eliminating spontaneity or emotion. It means integrating them into a system that aligns with purpose. Chaos is necessary. It's where ideas are born, where change begins. But it needs a container. Discipline is that container. It's waking up at the same time, keeping promises, telling the truth, maintaining consistency even when you don't feel like it. Every disciplined act is a statement that you're no longer ruled by impulse but by intention. And slowly, your internal landscape changes. What was once scattered becomes unified. What was once aimless becomes directed. Redemption emerges through that process because discipline redeems chaos by giving it meaning. The pain, the mistakes, the confusion, they stop being evidence of failure and become raw materials for creation. You begin to see that chaos was never the enemy. It was the teacher waiting to be understood. It was trying to show you what you could become if you learned to harness it. When you accept that responsibility, you move from disorder to purpose, from noise to clarity, from reaction to creation. That transformation is redemption itself.